My guest today on Front Row Rugby is former Springbok centre, the legendary Devet Barry. Devet, welcome to Front Row Rugby. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Peter. Thanks for reaching out. I appreciate it, and it's nice to be on your show.
Just before we begin the conversation, let's have a look at the trivia question for this week. Who was the leading point scorer when the Springboks won the 2009 Tri-Nations? Now, if you know the answer to that, you can put it in the comment section down below. We'll also find out if Devet knows the answer to that question, but we'll do that at the end of our conversation. Devet, I'd like to begin in the year 2000. You made your debut against Canada. Talk to me about what that was like and also scoring a try on your debut.
Yeah, thank you. It's thinking back of your debut, it's such a special occasion, I think, for everybody or anyone who makes his debut for the Springboks. Just leading up to that year, I wasn't actually, I wasn't really in the Stormers, or I was in the group, and then Brendan Fenter got injured, and I got opportunity to tour with the team, and then I got my opportunity, and straight away after the Super Rugby, I got picked for the Springboks. So things happened quite quickly for a 21-year-old. So to take everything in, it was quite a lot, and things happened so quickly. But it's still such an awesome experience. I think the pressure, obviously, for playing to starting your first test versus maybe on the bench, might be something different, but it was a fantastic occasion. We were in East London, and I got a try on my debut, so which made it more special. I didn't score many tries after that, though, unfortunately, but it's still a special occasion. I think any test you play, may it be 1 or 20 or 30 or 100. It stays every time. It's a very special occasion, and yeah, as a very young boy or man, then it's a dream come true for any young South African kid that wants to play rugby. And I must admit, it was never. I realized when I started playing for the Springboks, for the Stormers, that the next step is almost the Springboks, and then it sort of hit me when I started playing for the Stormers that, there is potential, because those days we only had 4 Super Rugby sides. So you were one of 8 options if you first choice in your region, so it became a reality, and as I said, very special moment for me.
So after that Canada match, there was a 2-test series against England. We shared the spoils with the English, and then it was time for the Tri-Nations. And then they also introduced the Nelson Mandela Plate that season. So we played against Australia, and then that was sort of before the Tri-Nations. So it was this one-off test match against the Wallabies. But we did suffer 2 heavy defeats against the Aussies over there. What do you think went wrong in those test matches?
It's a long time ago. I mean, I should go and have a look again at the stats. But we did suffer quite a bit, and I'm not sure. I thought we had a real good side, and it was quite a long tour. We had the 2 tests there, and then we had a break. We went to a holiday resort, but it was definitely not a holiday resort for us. We were training quite hard. So because of the loss, we did a lot of extra training and, self-reflection. It's quite difficult to say, for me to remember those 2 tests. I think it was quite obviously tough as always. It's quite difficult to tell you. I mean, I can't really now recall, what was the specific things that went wrong there. But I know that we got the bad side of Nick Mallett on that and that week off in the east coast of Australia.
Hey, if you're enjoying this video, why not hit the like button?
Speaking of Mallett, I mean, you will remember this, that he was pretty much coming to the end of his time as the Springbok coach. And I've always thought it was really interesting how in the beginning, Nick Mallett went on that run of 17 unbeaten test matches. And I know that you weren't actually in that squad. And then sort of things began to unwind or spiral a little bit out of control. And then the results suddenly weren't that good. And you were in that squad in 2000. Could you sense that something maybe wasn't quite right with Mallett at that stage?
No, I don't necessarily think so. As I said, almost in a stage of your career, you're just happy to be there. You're so young, and you just want to be, and you play as hard as you can, and follow your leaders. We had a fantastic leaders in that stage. But I do think, if I recall correctly, in 1999 there was a bit of a hiccup from a leadership point of view when Gary Tuchman was dropped. And when I really have fond memories of Nick Mallett, and I think one of the better coaches I was coached under. But I think that might have been a little bit of a mistake. That transition from a leadership point of view does reflect into the players, and there was a bit of a maybe an uncertainty between some of the senior players, or maybe who's responsible for the leadership roles, etc. Not that, we had Joost, we had Corne, we had Andre Vos, Bob Skinstad. There's a lot of leaders, John Smith coming through. So there's enough leaders. But I think it was just maybe a little bit of uncertain times. If you jump a couple of years further, when Nick Mallett openly picked 24 guys for the first test, he appointed John Smith way in advance, so everybody knew where they stand, and he knew he was the leader, and so forth. So, and that obviously the success after that. But I think that might have been a little bit of a thing in that era, and I don't think it's unfortunate the way Nick actually went out, because he was definitely a very good coach, and obviously with Solly and everybody surrounding him, there was a good coaching staff, and unfortunately we didn't get the results in 2000 that I think for the team we had, we should have done better.
I'm interested to know about Harry Viljoen, because he obviously came after Nick Mallett, and a lot of the players that I've had on the show before have told me about how Harry brought business principles to the squad, and the guys were wearing fancy suits and they were treated as CEOs. I'd like to hear what your experience was like of Harry Viljoen.
Similar, experiences, or similar stories to what the other guys obviously said. But it's true, Harry, brought in specific line-out coach, specific kicking coach, skills coach, and so he was, ahead of his time, I would say. It was just maybe the control, because you only got for example, in a week, you got 3 1.5 hour sessions, and then a captain's run and an off day. So to fit everything in, need to be managed properly, and he brought in everything, maybe. If and I don't want to criticize anybody, but maybe in that stage it was just maybe not managed properly to give everybody his piece of the pie, because the line-out guy wants 5 hours and the kicking guy wants 5 hours, but there is only 1.5 hours in a week. So, but from that point of view, he definitely were ahead of the others from a specific coaching facet of the game, defense, attack, scrum, line-out, etc. So I enjoyed him. It was a very short stint. For example, the one end of year tour, I wasn't picked, and then he picked me again, and then I said, but nothing has changed. I didn't change much. But then he said, no, I can also, act as a third loose forward, because I can also steal ball, So then you see that contribute again, and but it's coaching, you get different, when people pick coach teams, then people that's in form and people that's available, obviously from an injury point of view, if they are available and fit to play, then you pick those guys. So and people change perspectives. So but he was different to the others, So, but I still enjoyed him, and we enjoyed the nice clothing and the Aaron Williams shoes we got. So it was quite nice.
Absolutely. Okay, so Harry Viljoen lasted until the beginning of 2002, was then replaced by Rudolf Strauly. And that 2002 Tri-Nations, even though we didn't really get the results, there was a lot of promise being shown. Some of the performances were quite good. And then I think the highlight was that win over the Australians at Ellis Park when Van der Greef scored that try right at the end. That was actually quite memorable. But then in 2003, things started to go wrong again, and we got quite a bad hiding at Loftus, 52-16 against the All Blacks. Robbie Kempson was on this show, and he said that was the lowest moment of his Springbok career. Would you agree with that statement?
The Australia era was a bit of there's a bit of a cloud over it, if I may say that. Some of us, I'm thinking of guys that was senior in that stage. Robbie Kay obviously eventually didn't go to the World Cup. He said he's not going to be involved in this, and he went overseas. And then guys like Selborne Boom, Cornet, not a lot of others that was towards the end of their career and got opportunity to play in the World Cup. It was quite a daunting thing, because you want to play so badly in the World Cup, and then things aren't very healthy. US van der Westhuizen as well. The guys, and then you get youngsters that came through like a Jacques Fourie, Skalk Burger played in 2003 with us. And that's their first experience on a Springbok tour, and our lasts, So it is to a sense a low point in my career as well, which is quite disappointing, because you work so hard, and I was only 24 years old at that stage, and I was sort of, and we got so many injuries. Maurice Joubert got injured, John de Villiers got injured, so in the back line we were really thin. And not that any of the other guys who made the side is of lesser quality, but the fact is we lost senior guys before the World Cup, so in the backline specifically, so it wasn't easy. But it is just the way things was maybe handled, and the way we got treated as players. That was a bit of a disappointing time in our career, and then obviously the disappointment of the World Cup. We got knocked out in the quarterfinal against New Zealand, which was very disappointing. You sort of your whole career, not your whole career, but I mean, we got such a hype over a World Cup, but just the way we trained and the way we prepared wasn't always, it's always easy to say afterwards, but it was never the right way that things was handled.
I think you know what I'm going to ask you next, since we're in 2003. I've had a couple of the old Springboks on the show that have told me their stories from Kamp Staaldraad. What's your story?
Well, survival mode. You sort of just go into survival mode. But the idea behind Kamp Staaldraad, I think, come out of the Chris Kitchie era, where Rudolf Strauly and the 1995 World Cup, they had similar sort of fast-paced camp, I would imagine. But again, the suffering together make you stronger together. But if it's done in the right way, it felt like we had a little bit of a negative thing around the whole Kamp Staaldraad. So the idea behind it, I think, was fair. Just maybe the way it was handled, the way people were treated. So it was quite an experience, and I enjoyed certain aspects of the camp, because there was just this one night they dropped us off all on our own, and we had to survive. And There was a few recce's there that supported us, and I was they took 10 on a bakkie, so we were 30 guys, so 10 on a bakkie, and then so I was standing last. So the only disadvantage we didn't have enough, we didn't have as much daylight left as the other 20 guys that left, but we had the fortunate conversations with the recce's that learned and teach us a few extra tricks for our one night alone in the veld. So I quite enjoyed that. I learned how to boil a egg without anything. So one day when you visit me in Cape Town, I'll show you. And I learned a few other tricks and trades from a survival point of view. But I enjoyed that night in the veld because no one bothered us, no one shouting at you. You listen on your own, you can watch the stars and have a few thoughts of your own and process a few things. But what was funny, the one day we, and maybe you've heard the story before, we were in a dam, but it was very, very cold. And I don't know if you've heard this before, but they put us into the dam and out of the dam cold. And we hardly had any fat then because, I remember a guy, Stefan de Blanche, how he trains nowadays even, and he was like so skinny, he had no fat in him. So for us, that was a bit more skinnier, those cold water, you sort of froze, then you have to get out and put your pants on, your clothes back on, but you're so, so cold, you can hardly do it. But the guys and the coaching staff were making a small little fire on the side and brewing a little boerewors. And remember, we didn't eat. So the smell was quite, nice. And then the veld got catch fire. And they chased us out of the dam to go and help, kill the fire. And so everybody was chasing the fire and doing everything. So there's one particular guy, instead of helping us, so everybody was running away from where they were brewing because the fire was taking into the field. And eventually we were looking for this one guy, and he was looking where he is. So all he did is he ran to where the braai was and made himself a little hot dog. So he scored a little boerewors roll, and the rest of us were putting out the fire. So there was funny things happening, and we learned a few things of each other, learned a few things about yourself, and we also learned how not to do a Springbok camp before the World Cup.
That's a great story, actually. It's nice to know that there actually was a funny moment also in between in Kamp Staaldraad. So, like you said, we went to the World Cup. It was a disappointing experience. The Rudolf Strowley era was a disappointing time in Springbok Rugby. But then things actually changed in quite a dramatic way. Jake White came in. Things became a lot more positive. We won the Tri-Nations in 2004 as well, which I don't think a lot of people saw coming. Just tell me, what made the Jake White Springbok squad so different?
Well, exactly what you're saying. It was a much more positive vibe. As I mentioned earlier, he picked 22 guys for his first team. He didn't pick more. I think 24. So you thought you were there and about, So that gave us a lot of confidence. And from a Stormers point of view, we had a fantastic season. We played the semi-final against Crusaders away that year, and that was quite a positive. So we had a very positive Super Rugby season. So and then the bulk of us went into the Springbok side. So we also took that positive vibe into the Springbok side. But the coach always sets the vibe. He sets the tone. And that's what Jake did. He was very positive. And a lot of us, he coached in 1999. A lot of us was under him. He was assistant coach then for us as an under 21 side in Argentina. And, John Smith, and, that's why it was obviously him and John came a long way, all of us, because he was our under 21 coach as well. When we was also successful, we won against New Zealand in 1999 in the final. So there was a lot of our players that came through from the 99 under 21 era in the 2004 squad that he coached. So all that obviously the positives that came through that, and we played a positive game. We trained really hard. we had a lot of good goal settings, and obviously it was nice just to have a different experience again, especially after the negativity of 2003, and there I have to, from Stormer's point of view, we played very positive rugby that year in 2004, and we got to the semi-final, but it was quite tough because, sorry that I'm jumping back to the Super Rugby, but we played the Crusaders, flew back to Cape Town, played the Sharks in the last pool game, and we had to win them to get a semi-final, and then flew back to Christchurch. So in 2 weeks' time, we flew right around the world twice. So that was quite tough. But anyway, so we got back, and it was just phenomenal. The vibe in the 2004 Tri-Nations, guys like Brian Abana came into the squad, starting his career. Jacques Fourie obviously back in. John de Villiers got back from injury. So we had everybody back. We had a fantastic pack of forwards. John is our leader. It was just, Jake just brought back, all the positive things, and why, and that's what he always said. He said, why can't we, that is such a strong under 19 schoolboy players in South Africa. We're so strong. We beat everybody. Why can't we take that through to our senior sides? And that's the positive things, starting to believe that we are actually better. We are good. We can compete, believe in ourselves. And he installed that back into the Springbok culture. We changed the blazer back to the from just the plain green to the green and yellow collar, which was again something that was brought back from the older, from the previous years, which was nice to bring back that collar with the little yellow piece in it. So a lot of things he brought back, which was quite nice and brought a positive vibe, and it showed the results.
It certainly did. We won that Tri-Nations in 2004. In 05, the good results continued. I actually thought that we were better in 05 than 04, but there was obviously that test match against New Zealand. I think it was in Dunedin, where they beat us narrowly right at the end as well, which I still think is one of the best test matches that I've watched. Even though we lost, obviously, that wasn't what made it great. And then 06, you played against France, and that turned out to be your last test match. Why do you think it ended there?
Obviously, from a player point of view, personal point of view, it was quite disappointing. Obviously, the aim was obviously to take part or to be part of the World Cup 2007, which was obviously when we started in 2004 with Jake White. He already said to us, and that's how positive he was, says we're going to win the World Cup. That's how the belief was, and the aim was to win the World Cup in 3 years' time. And they did, or we did, unfortunately I wasn't part of it. It wasn't our greatest test in Newlands. We made a few hiccups, and they scored that long haul try from our try line, or from their try line, or their 22, that try they scored. But that's life. It's unfortunately that is the way it is. There's a lot of things you can go back and say, if that, if this, if I, it's, and unfortunately, Jake took a different path with different centre pairing, and it showed as well that Jacques and John actually, they are both fantastic rugby players. And as a combination, they were fantastic. They played. They have the record for the most tests together. Marius and I kept it for a while, and I think we're second now. Maybe then and the Alinda may nick us later this year or whatever. But it's part of sport, and it's part of the acceptance, and it's part of the things you learn as a sport. To accept these things. It's not easy. It's tough. You don't want to be left out. You want to be part of that positive group. You want to be part of the World Cup. And it is very disappointing, but that's where you learn to move on and look at yourself and reflect on yourself and say, listen, what do I need to improve? In 2000, and it was a very, obviously for me, 2007 was very important, and I had a fairly satisfying Super Rugby, and then going into the World Cup, I felt I played good enough to be in the Springbok side, but that wasn't meant to be, so, and luckily the guys went on and won the World Cup. So we were all very happy. I signed for Harlequins, a little bit before the World Cup, but the aim was to go after the World Cup. And I actually watched the game with my Harlequins mates, so against England. So it was quite satisfying to watch it in England.
It was a satisfying experience, that's for sure. So, David, my viewers love to know the answer to this question. Who was your toughest opponent?
Sure, I had many. I was fortunate to play against many good players. I was fortunate to play against a guy like Tana Omanga. He was the guy that can actually run over you and then pass you or, around you. And he might just chip and chase. So, and then another guy that I was very fortunate, just for one season, I played Tim Horan, only 1 or 2 games against Australia and Queensland Reds. Someone that I looked up as a youngster, I felt he was fantastic. He had all the skill sets. Aaron Major was a very difficult guy to play against, not as physical, but he had all the skills, left, right, kicking, passing, very good distributor, stepping. So you never knew what he was doing, especially if you're playing next to a Carter or Andrew Mertens. And then yesterday in South Africa, I played against fantastic, talented guys. So it's quite difficult to single out someone. We played against John and Jock. We played it with them. When I was coming into the ranks, Yapi Miller was obviously a big competition for us. And Andre Snyman, we looked up to these guys. In 1997, we were first year out of school, and then these guys were playing. They were our heroes, and then you get the opportunity to maybe train with them and play against them. So these guys are Grant Esterhuizen, all these guys that we played against and with each other. So very difficult to single out anyone.
And what are you up to these days?
I have a trading company that we trade building materials in. So we buy and sell mostly timber and ironmongery and a few other things. We do a bit of a HDP pipe and all sorts of things we do in that company. So mostly in the building industry. And then I've got a small manufacturing plant that does called styrene cornices. We manufacture polystyrene cornices for the retail market, and we distribute that in countrywide. So yeah, it's a different life, but we've got weekends now and we've got family, so we enjoy those times as well.
Sounds good. So before we finish, we need to look at that trivia question again quickly. Who was the leading point scorer when the Springboks won the 2009 Tri-Nations? Do you know the answer, David?
I wanted this 2009. Brian Abana.
Oh, that's not a bad guess. He was probably right up there. The correct answer is Morné Steyn.
Oh, well. Well, I play. My boys are not allowed to play much games, and they play PlayStation, and they pick Morné Steyn all the time because he just makes all the points.
So he's in your house quite a lot then. David, I want to say thank you so much for your time today. It really was lovely having you on here on Front Row Rugby, and hopefully we can have you on again in the future.
Yeah, thank you very much, Peter. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show, and thank you for a lovely show. I appreciate it.
Last time on Front Row Rugby, former Springbok wing Jacques Olivier was my guest. You can go and have a look at that video. It's appearing on the screen right now. Next time, another former Springbok wing, Tonderai Chavanga, will be here. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed that video, why not tackle the like button? You can also subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any content from Front Row Rugby. See you next time.